Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna take a look at the very first Aerangis orchid that I get to see in bloom in person, and this is the Aerangis citrata. This orchid I purchased about 2 months ago or 3 months ago for my birthday from Ana Maria from Miracle Orchids here on YouTube, and it already came with some flower spikes. So I cannot take full credit for the flowers, but at least it managed to bloom. It did well on transport, although it was very dehydrated. I don't believe this orchid is such a finicky orchid since it managed to bloom, but as you can see, I do have quite a few buds that did not develop. So what do we have here? Well, this is a orchid species that belongs in the Aerangis family, and if you want to know more about this orchid and where it comes from and how its natural habitat is, I'll link you down below to the link from Orchid Species, and you will learn more about it. And since you don't really have a reference point of how big this plant actually is, let's take a look. This is a miniature orchid, as you can see. This is my palm, and the leaf span is about the size of my palm, maybe, I don't know, 15 centimeters. So this is a miniature orchid, and of course the flowers are tiny as well. Let's get you a close-up. I was actually expecting these flowers to be tinier than this, and even though they're small, they're not necessarily super tiny. Now on camera, the flowers appear to be a clear white, but in reality they have a sort of a greenish, buttery kind of color to them. So they're not bright white like I expected them to be. They have a hint of something else, but for all intents and purposes, this is a white orchid. It's not colorful. A great little feature of the flowers, as you might have noticed, is the long spur. Do you see how long it is in comparison to the flowers? Well, this is a trait shared by many Aerangis orchids actually. The spur is really long in comparison to the flower, and in some species extremely long, and this is because they are selective with their pollinators. There are specific moths that pollinate these specific species, and this is quite the interesting adaptation feature because you can imagine there are multiple flowers and orchids that are not compatible with this orchid when it comes to reproduction. So by selecting a specific type of pollinator, the orchid ensures that the pollen it receives is coming from an orchid of the very same species. And even though in nature it does happen a lot that flowers receive a different type of pollen that will not yield anything, in this way the orchid ensures that the numbers of flowers lost due to the wrong type of pollen is minimal. And I find that quite interesting, and as I was saying, it is a shared trait with many Aerangis type orchids, not necessarily only Aerangis but Aerangis as well. Now about the flower display, this orchid is known to create really long pendant flower spikes full of flowers, but mine has been through a lot, and as I was saying, the tip of the flower spikes, you can see, it kind of dried. I cannot blame it. I have it for 2 months only. It is a miracle that it actually bloomed considering it was pretty cold on transport and so on. So for all intents and purposes, this flower display, even though it's not the full potential of the orchid, and you cannot really say it's spectacular, is pretty fine with me. So I'm hoping next year it will be a little better. If you search pictures of this orchid on Google, you will see what I mean. And another really nice fact about this orchid is that it can always create multiple flower spikes in the very same blooming period. And of course, the more mature or older the orchid is, the more flower spikes, the showier. So I'm really excited for next year. Alrighty, now let's tackle the fragrance subject. This orchid is known to be fragrant. Many Aerangis are, and as the name suggests, this orchid should have a scent of lemon. This is how many people describe it. Well, sadly, mine has absolutely no scent, and at first I thought maybe it has to do with the environment or the fact that she's still establishing. But I searched on the internet, and most often than not, this orchid is not fragrant for people. There are a few individuals that do have a fragrance, but some of them really have no fragrance at all, and it doesn't have to do with the environment. I'm not entirely sure if the original species, the one you find in nature, actually is fragrant. It would make sense to be fragrant, and it would make sense to release its fragrance during nighttime, how usually Aerangis orchids do, because it has white flowers, it has a specific type of moth that pollinates it, and moths for the most part are nocturnal, but sadly mine does not have a fragrance, and it's a really common thing to get an individual that does not have a fragrance. So sadly I cannot say anything about the fragrance. That's a little bit of a letdown, but the display at least is really beautiful. Okay, a few words on this orchid. As you can see, it is a monopodial orchid, and leaf-wise it kind of looks like a phalaenopsis orchid. And what do you know? The care for this orchid is pretty similar to a Phalaenopsis orchid, as much as I read and as much as I observe actually. It doesn't really need a lot of strong light. Intermediate light or bright shade will do great for this orchid. I'm currently growing it under lights, but I do benefit from bright light in my greenhouse as well. What I did notice with my previous Aerangis orchids is that indeed they kind of really hate sun, and they can get leaf burns pretty fast. So from this point of view, it's a good thing if you don't benefit from a lot of light in your location or in your house. This orchid will tolerate bright shade very well. Another thing that this orchid really likes is moisture and water. With my Aerangis, again, I had issues keeping them mounted because I could not keep up with the amount of water they actually preferred. And keeping them potted obviously works a lot better for me, but of course if the medium goes bone dry and it stays like that for 1 or 2 days, I already see the leaves starting to droop down a little bit. So these orchids are quite thirsty. They're not the most sensitive to water, but they're quite a lot thirstier than I expected. And as it just so happens, I do find the Aerangis pretty much the same. They would not be so happy without water as, let's say, Vandas are. This doesn't mean that the orchid likes to stay in a super soggy medium. No, in no way. Actually, it likes a lot of ventilation, and this applies to Aerangis as well. The more ventilation you provide around the roots, the better it will be for the orchid. And of course, if you don't forget to water it, everything should be okay. For this reason, all my Aerangis orchids are potted in chunky medium. Temperature-wise, again, I find them to be pretty intermediate, pretty similar to Phalaenopsis, but they don't require a drop down in temperature to bloom, I suppose. I never read anything of the sorts, and since I didn't bloom any of them from scratch, but from what I researched, they really don't need this temperature variation. And if you read more about where the species comes from, you can have an idea about what's happening in its natural habitat or variations or things of the sorts. Other than that though, I find them to be pretty easy growers. They can be grown mounted successfully if you have time to water them. If you're not that good with free time, obviously potted is a good option for you as well, as long as you maintain the medium airy and you use chunky pieces. You don't really use sphagnum moss. I don't think I've seen any Aerangis orchid in a pot with sphagnum moss from all the pictures that I saw, so maybe there's a reason for that. I can tell you that in an airy medium they do very well, and in a medium that is too dry, they will suffer really badly. Other than that, I am really into Aerangis orchids right now. I'm thinking of purchasing a few more species. I do have 2 more. One is the biloba and the other one is the Luteal alba, variety rotosticta, but that has an issue. I have some issues with the foliage. I might repurchase it. I'm suspecting maybe Fusarium, I don't know. I'll see what I'll do. That one isn't doing all that great for me, but these 2 are doing really well. So now it shall remain to be seen how long these flowers last. They're supposed to be quite long lasting, but you know, you never know. So I'll keep you up to date, and thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. I think this is a really good choice if you don't have a lot of space in your growing area. And also I've seen these orchids kept in terrariums because they do enjoy humidity as well. So for those types of setups or locations, I think they're a really good choice. And of course, the bloom display in comparison to the orchid itself is really great because it can create a lot of flowers. In some species, the flowers are actually bigger than the plant, and the flower display, of course, is majestic. And I think it's time to wait for the dog to finish barking. It's the 6th time during this video it barks. Oh gosh, that dog. He sees a fly, he barks. I cannot really blame him, he's kind of lonely. I kind of feel sorry for him. It's not my dog, but yeah. Anyway, so that was it on the Aerangis orchid. Thank you for watching, hope you've enjoyed this. And as a last note, this is not a rare species of the sorts, even though on eBay you will see all types of orchids as rare orchid and so on. No, none of them is really rare, especially the Aerangis. You can definitely find them in orchid nurseries, online or local if you have one of them. Don't expect to see them in grocery shops or anything of the sorts anytime soon, at least. So yeah, definitely if you're into Aerangis or you want to start a collection, look in orchid nurseries, both online and local. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchid and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye! Okay, I'll just go ahead and say it. If you don't want a dog in your... Okay, I'll just go ahead and say it. If you want a dog to keep it in a corner all the time, do not get a dog. Just don't. Get a pet fly or something. Anyway. So, my Rhinanthera philippinensis. Bunch of roots here, but then... What is this? I found something here that is starting to poke through. I don't think it is a root. I hope it's not a root. Whenever a new root sprouted, it was a little bit red. This is not that red. So, could it be a flower spike? I sure hope it is, because if it's another root, you and me, we're gonna have some issues.